Hi, I'm Kerry. Pleased to meet you. Welcome to the Roundtable. And we're all going to take a turn of saying what our project is and where we're at with it. And if you want to come and join us, please feel free to do so because there's plenty of room. I'm sorry there's no cake and biscuits.
Perfect. I can go ahead and start. So, Bentley Davis. Yeah, technical difficulties. Um, which project name I want to use? Gullybot, which is a. Actually, let me reboot. How about someone else take this? My mic keeps muting.
All right, I can go. I'm Jubilee. My project is Solution Raising, and this where an hour-long conversation that generates potential solutions to real-world problems that we could implement now if we had $100,000 and 10,000 people. This week we held a solution raising on. Carrie, when did we hold a solution raising on this week?
Hobbies.
Hobbies, right. We held a solution raising on hobbies. There's so many now and we had our what was going to be our last process raising, but I think Raymond and he's going to come to the next solution raising, which we're going to do on poverty. And I've been writing up a article kind of doing a solution raising on solution raising. So what I've done so far, why it started, the middle part of, a future where we have a platform where anyone can come on and solve a problem with 10,000 people, to, of course, the adjacent possible, which is where my mind beautifully falls apart because there's like millions of possible iterations for even, a handful of options. So I'm writing that up. And the thing I could probably use help with the most that can't really be done during the hour is help editing that article. Once I feel it's done to the best of my ability, I know it won't be done. So having someone else look it over, making sure it's grammatically correct. My intention is to publish it on Medium when I get a chance. So that is what I am up to.
Okay, you go first, Adriel.
Sure. All right, I'm Adriel Briscoe. My project is WikiElection. Let me move my mic down a bit. WikiElection is a platform to help fight misinformation, specifically in politics, science, and news. I've been working with Bentley, who was having microphone issues a minute ago and will hopefully be coming back soon. And another person who shows up here fairly often, Matoush, been working together to create the functional prototype that is it's online. It's not very far along yet, but it's there. It's tracking people and organizations, and just sort of officially sent over the next round of spec to him last night to add something to track the legislation and how people voted, and sort of help start summarizing people's involvement in the legislation by giving them scores based on what they vote on. As for what I need help with, at this point we're building the prototype, so that's a pretty good start. I think the next thing is going to be actually needing an audience to both fill in some information, not in bulk, just sort of seeing if it makes sense for people to go in there and log votes and log legislation, and probably more importantly, discuss the scores for legislation. Just to say, what's good for one score and bad for another one, so it's not just me arbitrarily assigning scores. And then also just to give feedback on the UI and on things that are missing and that sort of thing. So I guess just in generally building an audience that actually wants to help review and move the project along.
Bentley, do you want to go?
I'm sorry, Kara, was that me? Okay, here. So yeah. This may not work. Project.
The universe decided Bentley should not be talking today. Or camera. Don't get to see or hear Bentley. He's been told to take a day off by the universe. Sorry, go.
Okay.
I was actually taking the week off. So,
No,
but
that's
yeah, for some reason StreamYard's not liking my mic. Y'all continue.
All right.
okay. Hi, I'm Ed Winchester. No, sorry, I'm Kerry Santo. I've got 3 projects that are all in various stages at the moment. The one I'm going to talk about just now is called the Third Place dot space, and basically it's going to be an arts and crafts pub where, and yeah, there's no booze, so people can just drop in, and it's going to be operated like a pub with an art. So basically, it's a mashup between an art department and a wonky tea shop with the atmosphere and opening hours of a pub. So we've managed to get a free space to host drop-ins, and that's been very successful till the COVID-19 shutdown happened, and wait until phase 4 to get back up and running that. But on the meantime, I've just been planning stuff. So my friends Chris and Fiona are now helping me with the plans because they're very good at that, and it's going to be able to make you build a new model of what to do with empty spaces that are left empty, and find ways of getting round the means and that of making things work, because apparently there's places all over the UK that are doing this now. So there's models that actually work. So as I said, I've got lots of research to do. I'm really, really grateful for Fiona Savage and Chris Cook, because they're just amazing people, and I'm so glad that they're going to help me, and I'm so chuffed with that. And the other project is going to be a network, but I'll talk more about that when I've actually built it, and then I can show people stuff and that and see what's what. But yeah, so that's what I'm up to so far, and this week has been amazing. Okay. I was going to say bye then, but I wasn't going anywhere.
So I don't know, Bentley, it looks like you're back on camera, but if you just want to, should we add you back in to, okay, we'll see if it's working.
And of course, no, it keeps me.
No.
Yeah, I'll just keep going.
All right. Now what do we do? No one really had anything for the hot seat. Adriel, Carrie, anything we need to shoot the shit for the next hour?
Well, I don't know whether you want to talk more about business, and maybe what Mark Campbell posted and what Nick Redmark posted about the Twitter thing, and to tell you off for not meditating.
Yeah.
Because I'm rubbish at meditating, and I'm not really active on Twitter, so that probably wouldn't work for me. And I hate being told what to do, so I'd probably rebel against it and not bother. So that's why I haven't said anything, because I thought that was a bit negative and that, and I didn't want to. Because like for people who like meditating and do Twitter, I think it's probably a great idea. But as I said, I just hate being told what to do.
Yeah, I don't. I'm gonna. Oh, am I on? I'm not on mute. Okay, good. I'll read. So Nick had said, an idea for a Twitter bot that helps you build habits with accountability. You start a thread saying, I will meditate 20 minutes a day. Then you have to write a daily update to the thread, or else the bot will tweet your name saying, I did not meditate today. Then someone suggested underneath, so auto shaming? And Nick responded with, we can make a bot that replies, I forgive you, don't give up. I just love that whole part. So yeah, so I love that idea that if you set a goal and then you're updating it, saying in my case, the most likely one would probably be I'm giving up pot for 2 weeks. So every day that I didn't smoke pot, I would post under it, right, saying I didn't smoke pot, and if I forgot to that day, it just assumes I did, and therefore, hey, I can't tweet today. I am stoned, and I like that kind of thing, which I think is brilliant, and also within Nick's capacity to make. He's made the Twitter bots and stuff, or Twitter stuff. Sorry, one second.
I quite like the sound of that.
Do you think he could actually make one for I forgive you for being an arsehole?
That should be version 2. Let's just own the fact that that's an automatic shaming tool to start with. I think that's fine.
It was like, I forgive you for being an arsehole today. Oh, thank you.
It's also really, it's an automatic self-shaming tool where it's like, it's not going to do it if you don't tell it to. So it's you're sort of publicly saying, hey, shame me when I don't do this, which is absolutely what it's doing. But it's using shame for the power of good, which I quite like.
And I love how we've moved on to like putting someone in the hot seat who isn't even here. Let's do next project without him here. I know he can handle doing the project. Belly, you keep muting and unmuting, so just feel free to chime in whenever you can/want to.
Yeah, even just through chat.
Yeah, we'll read your comments. Yeah. The other thing which I keep meaning to for Mark's post, I keep meaning to say because his idea is one of both the meta ideas before starting Together Tech, like it's something we desperately need, is a way to, and it's something that WikiLection is also dealing with in the realm of, but I wouldn't want to put that time in for Game B organizations in and of themselves. It has to be it has to be Game A and Game B corporations. It has to be all of them, or else like how do you compare them? There might be a really amazing new phone that's really Game B, but they don't know they're Game B versus someone in Game B, how do they actually measure up to each other? So I spent a lot of time thinking about that space, but it's also a meta solution that has come up a lot in solution raising. Like it's something that to be able to know what our corporations are up to, what our politicians are up to, which products to buy one over the other, which solutions to use, one over the other. Having that available in a very Game A way, I think is the way to go. Because if it doesn't, the Good Guide. So I had linked to the Good Guide under the post, and Good Guide I've known about for a decade, and they're a good resource, but they're not open source. They're not crowdfunded or crowd sourced. So if they're missing a product, you can't.
And I think they're paused right now.
Yeah, when they were bought out by someone who looks right. Anyway, I don't know if they bought them out to shelf them, but they bought them out years ago, whether it was too much work. But it's a lot of work to maintain that database. And then if people don't use it because they can't, it's the Good Guide. So it's giving you rankings based on the social justice-y, the environment, and your personal health, right? So something might be good for its employees, but bad for your health. And so it gave it a rank out of 10, and the company would get a rank. And so any of the products under, let's say, Burt's Bees would get a 10 for their company, but they might have put something in one of their products that made it less healthy, right? So they'd get a less with that. So I think the way they did it was good. I think having those three broken down, but you couldn't see why necessarily the companies got it. So to know why someone got it 2, you could see, okay, well, this ingredient was a carcinogen. They've kind of went through a few iterations where you could and then not see. But doing it in a way that isn't Game B, that isn't about just your values, just about your, doing it in a way that's also, is this cheap? Is it local? Can I get it? Where can I get it? Where can I bulk buy it with people? Is there a local one? To be able to put in my values, including to be able to save money, and having one app for all of that information. So you don't need, again, one for palm oil and one for fair trade chocolate and one for one that includes all of them.
Yeah. I think on that, then there's also the stuff that's sort of company adjacent, like what's the score of the company that owns that company, or who's on the board? What else have each of those people been on the board for, and is there anything that's maybe a red flag? Yeah. I think that's super important to have that sort of full snapshot, and then to have some sort of a list or an app where it's super easy to tell what companies to do business with, and then also a product. Look up, so you can either say, hey, I'm looking, for chapstick, and it's got Burt's Bees and a bunch of other stuff, or you're just saying, hey, I'm at the supermarket, I'm thinking about buying this, take a picture of a shelf with 20 products, and they can sort of overlay and make it a bit easier to actually make that choice instead of taking a picture of the barcode of each one, which I imagine is probably how most products like that would start, but that would definitely hamper adoption.
And that is how Good Guide works, is you take a picture of the UPC on the product, and then it will bring it up, which is helpful when you're trying to look it up. Yeah. But also, a lot of times it's not in there. A lot of times it's not in there because the Canadian one's different than the American one. Being able to take a picture of the actual product and the UPC and the ingredients and having all that information tied together is then I don't have, you know what I mean? I don't have to find the UPC and take a picture of it perfectly. Yeah. It knows, oh, you're in Canada, that's why it looks different. And by the way, your ingredients are a little bit different.
Totally.
So I take it there's a lot of companies that are doing greenwashing then, because like I know Fiona had posted about the greenwashing, and I think Ivana had posted about the greenwashing, saying that they're all green and everything else, and when they're really truly not. They're just doing that to sell their products and stuff.
Yeah, and like the same thing with saying that something is organic, and yeah, if it's not heavily regulated, or sometimes even if it is, people will definitely, blur the lines a bit if it means selling their product, just selling more of it or selling it for more. Because if you can lie about your product being organic, you can usually charge more for it.
So I think this is a pretty doable idea from a technology standpoint. Except maybe, the scanning and the photos, but at least, if you're about to go out and make a purchase or about to go to the grocery store, maybe a site where you could go and say, what are some, food product companies that I should look for when I'm buying things, right? And it would give them a personalized ranking, so you could say what your values are in different areas and be crowdsourced, like Julie said, where people are. It could be as simple as voting, but also I assume that if you say a company's not that good, it'd be helpful if you would say why. Um, and then that would be something that reason score could be used. So people could put in the reasons why, and then you could debate those items, and that would be kind of a...
Right. So sort of have like for each score, you've then got the underlying sort of back and forth on, well, they do this, yeah, but they don't do that, yeah, but they use these ingredients, yeah, but they source them this way. That ends up with the score.
So,
yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, whenever we talk about these, I think about funding. I mean, theoretically, if you get enough people using it, advertising would work. But until then, I wonder if there's a small enough use case that would be of value to people that they'd be willing to put in $10 a year or $30 a year, kind of like... I mean, I actually, Consumer Reports is just renewing my membership with them, and for like $40 a year. And that's really helpful when I want to buy a television, as far as getting a quality product. It doesn't delve into any of that other stuff. And of course, once you make something like that, like open source, then you run the risk that at any time someone will just start up a competing site and confuse everybody. But I don't know. I kind of wonder if we could get, 100 people putting in $10 a year to try something like that. But I don't know if we could build something reasonably that would have enough value to make it worth it.
I think you'd also, with this specific one, have people who maybe didn't want to put in $10 a year, but were able to put in 100 products, right? Like, consider that's like 10 cents a product, right? You're like just people who it's easy. Like, I'd rather take a picture of products. That sounds more fun. Or maybe it's 30 products they put in, right? That there's like the work that needs to get done. And that's easy enough that anyone can do it because you're not doing the critiquing. You're just like, hey, this product doesn't exist in there. I need to take a picture of the packaging, the ingredients, and the UPC, right?
Well,
and that is
yeah. I just think we need to narrow it down some, because if you go down to products level, you need a pretty high volume before it provides any use to anybody, right? Because if you search and it's not there, it's a waste of time. And actually, there are online databases of all the nutrition data, and there's several websites that serve that up. I don't know if you have to pay for that data or not. So we could integrate the existing data. But I was just wondering whether there's a higher level, like just at the company level. Like, you have Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts coffee, right? Or what is it, Tim's up in Canada, Tom's?
Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons, which is really good, by the way. I had it while I was up there. Yeah, just to have the major companies, and then just a way to crowdsource what we know about that company. And so you'd only put something in there if they have a product in there that is bad. Like if they're outsourced, that this one coffee that they're doing, that they're buying it and they're extracting from that community. then you could put that in. We could have a discussion about that, and maybe do it at the company level. And then if there's enough steam, could move down to the product level.
Yeah. Extracting from a community. I don't know what brand you're talking about there, Bentley.
And this is part of
Everybody.
the, like, MVPs are super powerful, right? We want MVPs and be able to create things agilely with agile, but also, like, this is the kind of thing where if the protopian ideal of this was up and running, it helps us create game B basically overnight, right? Because when there's new information from a company, right, something happens, Trump just did him and Ivana just did something about Goya Foods or something. I don't even know what's wrong with Goya Foods. But the fact that if you want to boycott them, if it was super easy to be like, here's my values, now tell me everything I'm not supposed to buy, we could end war in a month. Because it's like, when you can see every CEO on the board, it's like, no, sorry, if you make manufacturing weapons at all, if that's in your portfolio, nope. Like, we're going to be able to see everything.
And we're not going to be able to, like, we'll be able to avoid making you any money anywhere. So all of a sudden that makes, we actually don't want that person on our board or to invest in us because people are boycotting us for something that is completely outside of our influence. No, okay, now please go away.
Yeah, I mean, cancel culture that actually makes actually saves the world in a way where it's not. And hopefully there's a redemption road, right? Hopefully there is a way where it's like, okay, well, you used to be an evil motherfucker. Now you're on the road to redemption, and let's see.
Yeah.
Like Microsoft turned around in the last 10 years, complete about face. Amazing.
Yeah,
change.
It's true. And Google and Apple sort of done the reverse.
Yeah. Google's do not be evil. They took that off their thing a long time ago.
Do we need this do not? Let's just...
Yeah.
Let's just be evil.
Let's just save space. Yeah, and I think this starting with just organizations is definitely like a good MVP because it's still useful and way easier to manage. You don't have to worry about the product pictures and stuff like that. But then you are starting down the road of like, how do you crowdsource something like that? How do you make sure that you don't have the bad actors? There's still a lot involved and it still has use, but it's not quite as into the nitty gritty and, the bunch of pictures of stuff and then trying to get people to take pictures of stuff. You can just say, hey, try to avoid these companies based on what you've told us. And while I think that would end up having a lot more actual data entered, ideally, I think you would want, and based on what we've said, these companies actually have a good score. So where possible, lean towards buying their stuff.
Yeah. So to Jubilee's point, not just donating money to get access. I mean, it'd be nice if it's open to everybody. But just to make it start, I'd have it be, well, I don't know. We could talk about different things, but people could donate, doing investigations on companies or logging information that they find in the news, and then moderating to keep the bots out because you'll still need humans to do that to some extent until you can develop tools. But yeah, I mean, does it provide value if it's a minimum $10 a year to buy it, or does it need to be open source? Does it need to be open to the web to be useful, and then it's just donations? But I guess either way, if we could find 100 people that were willing to put in $10 a year or something like that, then it would probably be worth starting. So I don't know if we wanted to try that. I think it'd be interesting to put up a description somewhere and see if we get people to say yes or no whether they'd contribute. Which actually, I have a web domain, iwouldpayfor.com, that I've been meaning to put these ideas up and see if people are willing to fund it, or donate their time. We would need some people to fund financially, and then if there's people saying they'll put in their time to review and to do that, then all that.
Is this the kind of thing we could put a proposal together for? Carrie, remind me of the name of the site. I can never remember the name of the one with comments in it, and I muted you because of the cookie.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, was that? Yeah. Was that peer-to-peer? Oh,
no.
Open Collective.
Thank you. Open Collective. Why I can't remember those two words together is beyond me. but I like with any of those sites, I don't know how good they are at doing any kind of marketing as far as.
No, it's up to yourself to do.
It's up to you, but there's enough people in game B and enough what's the word, interest in this idea. This idea has been brought up enough that unlike the social enterprise thing, like social media, I think we get that we collectively get what this kind of has to look like. We might not agree on the MVP and what the minimal one is, but to know that this needs to exist in the world, I think like there's enough people, if we put up a proposal, put it up on Open Collective, that especially if we weren't putting in a lot of money to begin with, I think we could get enough money and interest generated to start something.
Yeah, I think Open Collective just takes care of the money side and the collecting of the money. So you'd still need someone to act as a legal. So say if you found somebody who was already a business entity, they could be a fiscal host, and if that fiscal host, obviously would help to do in admin and stuff because there's a few requirements and that. But if that fiscal host decided that they wanted to sort of like help projects, well, as I said, if they could act like that, and then whatever group or project they set up, they're in charge of fundraising and getting the money in and doing all the back end stuff as well for them. So the fiscal host is not left lumbered with sort of like, oh, I'm going to have to do all of this.
Right. And this is very adjacent to Wiki Election, so I can be the Penetra house for that because that's already incorporated and has a bank account.
Oh, is it? Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that'd be absolutely brilliant. Because I noticed it was if you've got 2 to 5 projects, you can have, I think it's $25 dollars. I think the US dollars it's in, and they basically charge I think it's 5% per entry for Stripe, because then that allows you. Right. You need to have a Stripe account, and you need to have PayPal. And I think if you've got a Stripe account.
Sorry, and it's Stripe that charges you 5%, or it's Open Collective?
No, it's the Stripe that charges you 5% per transaction. Good. But what you could do is, obviously, if people are raising the money, you could get the costs back of how much it costs you. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't be costing you anything, really, if, getting the funds in. And as I said, if people are chipping in, that would cover the cost. But as I said, I think it's 5% of every transaction on Stripe that they actually take the fiscal host.
That's pretty normal.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much they take off PayPal. But I think so. Like, I know a lot of people aren't bothering to use PayPal now, so they'd probably be better off Stripe. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because then you don't get charged.
PayPal might be one of the first companies to have an account on this site.
Right.
A profile.
Yeah. But because I could help you out with the admin, and as I said, if you were setting one up, to start off with, I'd help you out with that. Because I know you're busy and stuff, so I'd be able to help look after things. But it's, as I said, it's up to the person who's got the project to do all the back end admin of that project themselves, and not expect you as fiscal host, because basically, and you would need a bank account as well, right, for money and stuff. So if none of us have got a bank account, it can go to, it would all go and get saved up and that, and then you'd pay out expenses from what got sort of done. You know what I mean? So, but as I said, it's not up to the fiscal host to do all the back end stuff, all the admin stuff, because it has the collective or the group to do that. So it doesn't get all put onto you. You're just kind of like a holding agent for the stuff. So, Do
they have a lot of governance stuff over at Open Collective? As far as, or you bring your own?
I think they do, but you're also sort of like, I think they make sure that whatever group that's going on there, and the fiscal host as well, has got everything they need. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To keep it straight.
Yeah, and they look like they're also open to having feedback on, like, creating the next iteration to be even more of that. Probably is.
Yeah, because I know they've got people. I know they've got people who do the fiscal host, but my thing is, I'd have to trust somebody on there. You know what I mean? Because they might, if you don't know them and you just go with them. I'm not saying they do anything dodgy, but they might sort of like decide to shut down or stop doing it. And then
absolutely. This idea, though, the fact that it was raised by Mark and then people were interested in it, the fact that it was idea, I know Adriel and I have talked about this for years, something similar, the fact that it brings in Reason Score, Wiki Election, while Carrie was talking, I was like, I want to do a bunch of solution raisings on this exact topic, like having people come in and say, okay, well, because there's so many options, right? What is that MVP? What is what could 10,000 people and $100,000 do for something like this, even if we never get to that point? That there's actually basically a kernel here of the first, either Together Tech takes it on, right? And we like create it together because it is enough of like, it's none of our babies, that it could be all of our babies.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea.
But I also really want to invite Mark, both because it was he brought it up and because Mark's awesome.
I mean,
the more people, the better.
Well, one of the things that I read about the other day was how much Uber Eats and Just Eats, and the bank charges are actually screwing. So it's like little family businesses, and
I think they take 25%.
Well, I know there's one. What I was reading in the comments, this one guy who's got a chippy had to pay them about £2,800 a month for all. You know what I mean? And I wasn't even aware of that. And I just thought, because I know Leo had brought up that they were trying to do something in Brazil about the sort of like, because they've got the monopoly on stuff, and they were trying to get a co-op to build something like the Just Eat because they were kind of screwing everybody. You know what I mean? But I had no idea that these Uber Eats were actually taking that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, with all right, like the Uber Eats, with Uber, with Airbnb, like they tend to take a fairly hefty chunk of the transaction, like where it actually goes to the company, and that's why those companies are worth so much, because they have 1 billion transactions and they're making $1 per one, or $4 or $5 or $10. That adds up pretty quick.
It's just the ridiculousness of it is that like they could take $1 per transaction and still be
absolutely
stinking rich.
They talk about like
money
overhead and this and that. Like, no, not really. It's technology.
Well,
you have a bit of overhead,
because they've paid for they've built the platform or whatever.
Right.
So that would have been the majority of the cost. But after that, all you need to do is have someone maintain it. You don't need a big staff, for something that goes wrong with that. I just can't believe just how much they're screwing and how much advantage they've actually taken with, you've got the banks who take the money off the people and charging them card charges and that. Then you've got Uber Eats and Just Eat.
And the credit card companies.
And you know what I mean? And it's just
they have to maintain their vehicles, and they're not even making minimum wage. And I mean, that's where the other idea for a first project that I don't think there's enough will behind to actually make it is to have a labor platform, is to make TaskRabbit, Airbnb, those things, but collectively owned. Some of them already exist.
Yeah.
But so that more of the money stays between the transactions.
Those two projects merge pretty quick. I think, and that's one of the things that when you have something like an organization list, pretty quick you can end up with something like where you're actually kind of acting as like the anti-Amazon, where you're like you're actually saying, hey, here's almost an online store, and then you can start to buy things, but you're buying based on like the accounts, the profile of the account and the product, and you can say what you care about, and then it gives scores. And it's not just about trying to milk every consumer for every dollar and trying to maximize dollar from every avenue. It's about, fulfilling a certain role and taking enough from the transaction to keep the lights on, but not much more than that.
Yeah, because the other side, like everyone else, I feel like wants to go back to the 50s and 60s and like have worker co-ops and break up the big tech companies and like let's not have monopolies. And as much as I understand why they want to do that, there's like you don't dismantle Game A that way. It's like what's happening now with COVID-19 and especially with Black Lives Matter coming in afterwards. We're about to lose every small business. It's about to be only monopolies. Like the only ones that will succeed are the very few that are owned by, if we're supporting Black Lives Matter, right? The Black-owned businesses that are small and tiny, they're the ones who will succeed because they're going to get all of the money. Everyone else goes by the wayside. And there's a true cost to society in that. Not don't support Black Lives Matter. The true cost is that Amazon, Facebook, Google are gonna be, and all the other big companies are gonna be the only ones left because they got bailed out. They can handle more risk. And they're now buying up all the other ones. All the other ones go by the wayside.
Way more willing and able to play that sort of gray side of the law and ethics where, paying minimal taxes and not paying their workers, like every possible advantage they're already taking. That's how they got to be that big. And that's going to keep the lights on. And it's hard to fight that unless you shine a light on it.
And yet, together, like I'm less into one big massive cooperative, even though I know the efficiency of that, and more like how do we not break things up just to break them up. Meaning if we're creating something from scratch, right? Like we're kind of right now with Wiki Election, Reason Score, and Phoenix Lighthouse and stuff, like we are still separated, but we're also trying to help each other. We're trying to come up with omni-win solutions. We're trying to figure out other things. Is a very, like, coming together and creating the data and the infrastructure is how Game A just goes away, because Google and Facebook and them can't compete with that. But the idea that we're all going to start tiny little businesses and then they're somehow going to out succeed Game A is like, no, because your little, what I can't remember what they're called, like artisan jam company is not going to outcompete Welch's, right? Like that's not going to happen. But all of our tiny little jam companies might be able to, if you stop trying to compete between each other. And it's like, hey, here's the place you can go to buy any of those, but you can only buy mine locally in Vancouver, right? Because that's where it's made, and I only make 10,000 a year or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think something that's like an anti-Amazon takes into account, like it's almost adding an Amazon type layer on top of local businesses.
Yeah.
And so you might have like, okay, so if you have your little artisanal jam company in Vancouver, great, you sell it locally. But then a company in Calgary says, oh, that's selling super well. I bet I could sell that here. They make an order from that company just like they would in Game A, but now they've got a layer to be able to offer that efficiently to the population of Calgary. And then they can, make their money to keep their lights on and pay their employees, and people in Calgary can get that good product and the business, right? So it's like that typical Game A flow, but trying to optimize it for keeping the money local. Like the platform takes a minimal amount, which is of course the opposite of what Amazon and Uber Eats and all these other companies do, where they nickel and dime you every single possible chance they can get. And in the case of Amazon, they're going to be like, ooh, should we be making jam so we can keep all the money? Where it's the opposite of that.
And beyond that, right? Like when you have your own little artisanal jam company, then you have to go sit at the farmer's market and sell it. Like that's just a lot of energy to go into your little jam company, versus if I have my jam company, I know I can make 10,000. The platform's finding me my customers. In fact, there's a wait list because I'm only making 10,000. And if somebody in Calgary wants to sell it, I can give them the recipe. They could import it. But mainly it's the infrastructure that Amazon gives, like delivery. Right? Yeah. Delivery for super cheap, that you're going to get it, that the products are covered, that you can trust somewhat Amazon, and therefore you're going to go there to buy it instead of going
to I dislike it when I order something off Amazon and it's any of the other delivery companies, because they suck. Amazon is good. Like they're the only company that actually comes into my building. Everyone else, I think, just like throws the notice at the door as they drive by. And I've almost never actually done that. Yeah, so it's that level of service. And I think a part of it is not trying to replicate like the super ease of use that the Amazon does, because that it's just going to be a long time before you have the economies of scale that you have a chance. But it's sort of being open that you're like, hey, we're trying to be an alternative to this. And part of it is having like all of these different pieces connect, like the labor platform, where then you've got, well, part of that labor platform is possibly the creation of a product. Part of it is the shipping and the logistics and the delivery. And then once you have that, you can start to get really local and be like actually local services, carpenters and maids and that type of thing.
I'd like to bring this back around to first steps.
Fair enough.
We talked a lot about the future, but we gotta have milk before we have meat, right? So if we're talking like growing a baby. So I think the next step would be brainstorming a pitch, and that would be something we'd want Michael involved with, and maybe anyone else. So that'd be a good topic for solutions raising, right, Jubilee?
Mark, right? We're talking about Mark. Yeah. So could be what our pitch is a series of solution raisings, meaning pull it out to the Game B people over the next 2 weeks. We'll hold them over this period of time. If you want to have a say in this kind of a product, come be part of the conversation. And then how we harvest that to know what came out of it is the next step.
Well, okay, so yeah, we can do the broadening thing. My personal preference in general would be to start with a narrower focus and try and do that, but you can do it with a broadening focus. I just think it's going to be hard to bring everyone back down. But so we could have this series of solution raisings, but then at some point we need to have a meeting with a Dunbar number group of 5 to 10 people that would kind of come up with a proposal and then just put a post in the Game B saying, who would participate in funding, in crowdsourcing, and in moderating. And then we would have to have some sort of, or not have to have, but my suggestion is that we then also have some sort of idea of, if we have this many people saying they're willing to participate, then we could move to the next step.
And sorry, my kid was asking to spell a bunch of things while that was going on, but I got most of that. Yeah, the idea for the solution raising is that it would be somewhat focused. It wouldn't just be marketing or something along those lines. And we'd want to get more of like a question, like how do we best vote with our dollars, right? What is, and then
Do you want to speak to Mark about that then and see what he comes up with?
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to Mark about that. And see about, anyway, and offer the solution raisings. If we host them and nothing comes of them, nothing comes of them. But if people are part of the solution raising and they're like, yes, I want to be involved in this, that we have an actual process where it's maybe not just me holding the solution raising and then fuck it off, right? Oh, I didn't get your email. Oh, well, that there is more of a process, then we can bring those people in. Because one of the other things that is a problem, especially if we want us to be involved, plus Mark, is finding a time for a board meeting that works for all of us. Right? There's also the possibility of figuring out stuff that isn't needed, but we need a ton of people for that. Not just, if there's 6 people, we need to find the same time. We can't have multiple board meetings going on at different times.
What you could do is, well, as I said, I could do probably was see who's responded to Mark's post, or ask Mark who said they're actually interested, and then finding out where they are. And then take it from there in terms of what time you're having it, and if it's good for everybody and that, and then hopefully, but yeah, because there's been quite a lot of people who are interested in getting involved with that anyway. So I think it's just actually asking them what times do they have free, and then try and coordinate. So like you did for the Game A to Game B, you had two ones going on. You know what I mean? Could maybe have 2, and then they could both post them together, and then the people from that could actually comment underneath the links and that,
we can use my Zoom account or anyone's, and then we can break off and people can record or not record if they want to, and then we can post all of the recordings to wherever they go to. And to get like, some of those conversations aren't going to come up with any of them. Some of them are going to come, because Mark's was also very specifically Game B, right? How do we find Game B corporations and companies to support, which is very different than what we were talking about this whole time, because I don't think you can exclude the Game A ones. You can't see a picture of, like, how tall are you? You don't know how tall you are unless you know how tall everyone else is, right? You have some height, but you don't know how tall you are unless you're comparing yourself to someone else. It's the same kind of thing. You can't compare a Game B or a B corporation or not-for-profit unless you're comparing it to other things in the bigger space, right?
I think also, as we've seen in this group in Game B at large, it's hard to define it. So I think you would just need to track a bunch of different sort of aspects of something, and then you can say what you think Game B is, and then it can bubble up and say, okay, well, based on what you think Game B is, here's the companies that you should be doing business with.
Yeah.
And, starting with what are the most Game B-ish companies we can think of, and then working our way down is a more manageable process than every company in the whole world. So,
every company, Bentley.
Well, we'll get there. The only question is how. And I guess my concern is that if we do, I wouldn't myself do project raisings, because I think that's getting people. I mean,
you mean solution raising, like you don't think having.
I think asking people to brainstorm is going to bring up a whole bunch of things that we can't do, and then when we tell people, oh, this is what we can do, they're going to be disappointed because it's not going to include their ideas.
It might actually be a project raising that we want to do. You do a solution raising to start with, just to get anything that we're missing, and then start to do a project raising on, great, how do we start? Well, what's our next step?
Because most of the ideas we come up with are not going to be part of the MVP, just because you're
right.
You can only do so much. So I just think having Mark and us say, what do we want to propose to the group as an MVP would be more successful, but I'm open to
Mhm.
doing a solution.
And this is so. This is my reasoning for solution raising is that the solution raising process, right? What is happening now is the idea of like, okay, we've been talking about it, right? We try to vote, we don't have room on our phones, the good guide happened and went out of business, right? Like why doesn't this already exist? Why don't we already have this? Then like the big dream, the yes, once we have this is game B. We can stop war. We can, you know what I mean? Like to get people to see the power of that. And then, yes, what could we actually do now? And maybe we change the parameters to 100 people and $1,000, right? Like what could we actually do? Because the four of us talk about these things all the time. There might be an idea that's generated that is like, again, maybe it's because we don't have 10,000 people in game B. Maybe we change that parameter, but there could be something sparked that is MVP, right? And then we bring those together and say, which is the best of these MVPs. And like there's a reason behind it, but I get what you're saying. Like it's then we're trying to create that middle part, right? Where like everyone's beautiful utopian version of marketing with everything in it. And no, we can't do that. Who has millions of dollars and, you know, full-time work? No one. So what can we create when we have 1,000 people putting in $10 a year, right? For $10,000 a year, what can we create? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I'm open if we want to do the solution raising before the project raising, and just see if anything comes up. But yeah, but you know, I would still say kind of the steps would be a solution raising, project raising, specifically saying what can we do as an MVP, or I mean that's part of the solution raising. But yeah, I would narrow it down. Maybe not in that meeting, but at some point it needs to be more like 100 people and $1,000 a year would be the minimum starting point. And then if we got to say also when we put out the proposal, if we don't get that, it can hang around, but until that many people kind of agree. And I think the proposal could just be a Facebook post with voting on it in the main Game B channel once we figure out the verbiage for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can head down that path.
That's good. So what are we actually doing? I'm gonna offer solution raising to Mark and Game B if Mark says yes. Really, either way, we can have solution raisings on this topic. But if no one's interested, that's all their idea. And then, as far as writing something in Game B Game B after that for the MVP, we'll do that after, or what is?
I guess if the solution raising, I don't know if the end of it I wouldn't think at the end of it you'd really have like a good solid wording for an MVP, so then I might suggest let's then do a project raising, take the output of the 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 and you know whatever we came out of that solution raising, do a project raising to say, okay, what's a specific wording we want to use and how small can we make it, and then write up the proposal and then put it in there, and then if we get enough people, then we can talk about collecting money and organizing the situation, or creating an MVP based on volunteer time, and then see if we can get more participation. We'll figure it out after that step. So
Can we have MVP raisins?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what a project raising is, but yeah.
Right. And do you think we'll have a car park of MVPs?
Well, it's hard enough to get them built, but we'll see.
Honestly, if we did, like that is like creating
kind of a hackathon.
Having the big vision and getting it to an MVP is 90% of it, and then
So after we do the solutions raising,
could you though? Sorry for butting in. You could do that with all the solution raises, is it? Turn them into MVPs. Just for because I didn't even know what an MVP was until a couple of weeks ago, and I'd like to learn how to sort of like write them. And that, but you can only write them if you've got stuff there that you can do with, you know what I mean? Get experience in writing them.
Once it actually becomes a project and you've got someone or a group of people leading it, where it's on its way to being an MVP, like that's one of the first steps in actually having a project and trying to build it. Whereas a lot of the outcomes of these solution raisings tend to be sort of nebulous and like sounds like a good idea, but then it's having someone to take that and put that into, okay, how would that software look? How would it work? What would it look like? And then that's usually, a couple versions in, and then you would have, people try to scale it back, be like, okay, so what's the minimum part where it's actually viable? That's
Okay.
the tricky part, because you don't really know the V until it works.
Right.
It starts off being the minimum not quite viable product, and you keep adding on to it, and then eventually people get interested. You're like, oh, now it's viable. Cool.
Right.
Yeah, that is, I mean, solution raising, whatever, it's like in between MVP and Facebook, Google, right? Like, it's like, here is a very powerful thing we could do with 10,000 people and $100,000 that isn't, we need to be Facebook and Google, and isn't just an MVP. But then, yes, how do we get an actual MVP out of it? Because the point is, it's an MVP, it's a, when you have the infrastructure to create something with 10,000 people, then it's an MVP generator. Like, it's like, this is, any idea can be implemented, but we don't have 10,000 people. We don't have the platform or the process to work through that with 10,000 people. So it's not yet, like, solution raising is kind of the MVP to create whatever the in-between between MVP and Uber, giant tech cooperative is.
Right. Okay. I'm going to have to head off because I'm going to have a chat with Luke and the gang in a minute. So I shall see you when I see you, and I'll say bye. I'm at Winchester.
Perfect. Thanks for hanging out, Carrie.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Great.
And I think Bentley was trying to chime in there, but we wouldn't shut up. So.
Oh, no, I think I was typing and I muted myself.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think that's a good path forward.
I mean, it'd be cool if they ended up creating, somehow this ended up actually being created, because it is a very powerful option and it ties into wiki election, reason score, solution raising, all of them. But I also don't want it to need to tie into those things, right? Like, we have to do solution raising or I'm not involved. It's like, all right, I like the brainstorming with a large group of people, but there is that trade-off between them. We have all the ideas, and how do we decide on which ones are actually part of the MVP? And there is ways to do that. Like, I mean, co-housing did it in a specific way of like, here's everything we want to have in it, and then what are the parts to the MVP? Because I think also having the tech people involved in the beginning, it becomes, is this within my skill set, as opposed to, is this within pretty easy technology skill set that someone else might have, right? That it's like, I'm not going to know either of those things. Oh,
the separating of like the product ownership from the product development.
Yeah. Because it's like, even if you know, like, Bentley can't code it, somebody might be able to. And so even at, you know, for $10,000, which doesn't mean it's not a viable option. It just means that it's not a viable, we can code it option, which is different.
And this current group seems to be good. Bentley seems to be quite good at separating like what he can do. Like, Bentley actually seems to have some good product management chops. So, and that's really what we're talking about here, is the managing of a product, is the sort of person or group of people who would attend a solution raising, attend a project raising, hear all, you know, the grand pie in the sky, grandiose plan, to be like, that all sounds great. These three things are our next step.
Yeah. And it's finding out. Like, I'm not figuring out, because I can't just sit down and figure it out, but figuring out, like, how do we work through something in a large group of people, right? And it's all coming together and playing out. Like, Together Tech, we are, like, a project is emerging, even if this isn't the one, right? And then there's also, I don't know, like, things are coming together.
Yeah. And just so there's no, you know, possible conflict of interest, I was kind of planning on building this anyway. I mean, not all the pieces of it, but most of the stuff that we've talked about so far, I've already got on my radar, not through wiki election, but through something that would share a data source.
Yeah. And that is part of it too. I mean, again, this is what I was trying to talk about, like, the difference between agile, that we want MVP and agile, and we also want something big enough and beautiful and good enough that it's actually viable, right? That like, people want to come on board and do it. And it's like, how to get through that middle stage, how to actually, because this is like, the good guide was way past that stage. And the fact they're anyway, what I was going to say is, with all these people having similar ideas, having a database of information that all these things can feed off of and feed back into, right? So instead of it being, but that's
Right.
a higher level of complication, because then it's like, well, wait, what does that database need to look like that WikiLection could use it, and Reason Score could use it, and a new, app could use it, and then how did you feed your information back into it?
Right,
Is
yeah.
more complicated, I imagine.
Also, kind of how do you decide or control which groups or which projects are accessing that data? Because like if somebody starts to put a bunch of advertising dollars where they're saying we're using that data, but they're intentionally sort of obfuscating and making it hard to use, or like basically using it to lie, then we're like, hey, you aren't a part of this, go away.
And making sure those things
and some of the projects might be open source. Most things that I'm sort of on the managing end of wouldn't be open source, at least to start with. And then I think like for most, if like a coder, like I think I'm assuming that a lot of things that if Bentley were the one managing it, probably would be open source. And I think it does end up being a good thing if you do it right, to have multiple projects playing in the same place, sharing data where possible, and then in some cases you'll be adding on your own data, and then the group can decide if that project wants to share its data, where would it fit into the overall open data versus open source.
Yes. And I'm trying to figure out where to go like from here, as far as I'm like, I could just let Mark watch this. That's the beauty of doing things live. Also, though, it's like expecting someone to watch an hour worth of us chatting, and it's not.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you want to create what we were talking about, like create that platform, this is a good talk to listen to. I mean, we've had a few talks about it, but I just don't know if we've offered anything that hasn't already been talked about a million times. But that's part of it. Because the things have been talked about a million times. How do we get them actually made into something in the real world? And that is the place that I'm playing in, and yet don't know how to quite play in there is, everyone wants a social media platform. Okay, but if you want it your way, it's not going to get done. Right. And how do we come together and create one, right? So it meets most of our needs most of the time, instead of it being, no, I need it to it's addictive, so people need to only spend 2 hours a day on it. Okay, but is that the hill you're going to die on? All right. People don't spend 2 hours a day on it, so that's not. They're just going to go on to Instagram and Facebook for the rest of their time. That's that there's how do we actually? And that's where I'm playing with solution raising and process raising, is ideas of how do we actually bring 10,000 people together. You can't bring 4 people together, because it's actually harder to bring 4 people together. You can't have a conversation with 10,000 people, but when there's a process to go through that they actually feel like their input is involved in it, and they feel ownership of it, then we can solve them all basically instantaneously, one after one after one. But that's not a given. Is there something? Yeah. It's an iterative. All of it's iterative. All of it is solution raising itself. I have a very specific 3-structure process. But if anyone started doing it and they decided to switch 2 of them, or they decided to add another component, or whatever that is, it's iterative too, right? Please tell me about it. Does it work for you? What is the main one? And then people can branch off and do their own thing. And having that be part of process raising as well, that it's not going to be one recipe that works for every project and every idea. It's all of the ways that we want to contribute feeding into a common database of ideas, and then what do we do with those ideas, and how do we actually
and assuming that we get to that point of having something like Together Tech, having a group of people that then other projects can sort of feed off of that community, how do you turn that community feedback into something actionable, into a specific project? Because as Bentley said, if you have a bunch of solution raisings, you're going to get a bunch of ideas, and really 90% of project management is saying no, being that sounds great, doesn't fit in with the current vibe, right? Or maybe it's a yes, but 10 years down the road. And then it's okay, so we did all this work, got all this feedback, people contributed, and then they were told no, even though everybody agreed with the idea. And the no might just be, it's really hard, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and you need 1 million people to do that. So it's it's either a no or a distant yes, which is effectively the same thing.
And I feel like there is a way for us to, I know we're right near the end, for us to do that in a way where people aren't hearing no, because that what you just said is clearly a no, right? It's thanks for that great idea. No, it's not happening now, right? And there's a way,
and you never actually say it, right? But
brainstorm everything you want in it, and now we have to order it in order of importance, and we have to bring together all of that information, right? no, you don't get a time traveling machine. No, you don't get this. No, you don't get that, because it's impossible, because it's too much money, because we don't have the database and the skill yet to do that. That's $1 million project, not a $1,000 project.
Yeah.
That there's a way. It's like, okay, is this, you might have ordered this at your top one, but there's there's 15 other people who've had, and that's at their bottom. So like you can see the democracy playing out in more than just a yes, no way, right? That it's like, okay,
Right.
well, here's every feature we would want, and now we've ordered them into our top 10. And now
like there are ideation platforms like that would, I think, are a very simple version of this, where people can submit ideas and then the community can vote up and vote down. I think you would have something like that, but you would end up with sort of multiple metrics where you might
know
have.
what any of those platforms are, or have you?
I think Idea Scale was one, but I think that might be the one that Facebook bought.
But it's still, I mean, I'm okay with using it if they still have it open.
I'm not sure it is. One second. Idea.
Yeah, so yeah, you can send them to me later. We're at the hour mark. I'm just interested in that for solution raising and whatnot. And
but I think that kind of a product would have not just that, but then you would have some technical people go in there and judge how feasible it is, and then possibly some marketing people go in there and say, how do we think adoption is going to be? How many people do we need to do this? Because what you would do in like, and this is very basic, like almost too simple product management, where you've got a list of features that sound good, like that you do want to do at some point, and then you give it, sort of like on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it and how useful is it? And if something is a 10 in difficulty and 1 in usefulness, that's a hard no. You're never doing that one. And then if something is a 10 in usefulness and a 1 in difficulty, you're doing that probably like super soon, because that's easy and it's super useful. And then as you get, further along that scale, that sort of decides the priority. And if you're like, okay, well, if one's a 4 here and a 6 here, and the other one's a 4 and a 6, that's
no, that's exactly what I want, and what I'm trying to use Reddit to somewhat do. But if there's already things out there that exist that I can put the information on and whatever, yes, that's awesome. So send me any of those that come to mind, and I will check them out. And otherwise, we can say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube, and we'll see you next Friday for an Idea Cafe, which we have no idea what it'll be on.